There is a specific kind of person who, when a car coughs its last breath and dies on the side of a desolate highway, does not immediately reach for a phone. They don't look for a savior in a brightly colored tow truck or scroll through a list of experts to outsource their misfortune. Instead, they do something almost ritualistic. They pull the lever, they walk to the front, and they pop the hood. They stand there, framed by the heat haze of the asphalt or the biting chill of a winter evening, staring into the tangled, greasy labyrinth of the engine bay. And in that moment, something shifts in their expression. It isn't the frantic mask of panic, nor the hot flash of frustration. It is something much quieter. It is a look that to the uninitiated looks almost like relief. That moment, that specific beat of silence before the work begins, is worth an entire lifetime of examination because the car isn't really the point. The car never was. When a human being learns to negotiate with a machine as complex, as indifferent, and as unforgiving as an internal combustion engine, something fundamental happens to the architecture of their soul. This transformation doesn't happen in the sterilized air of a classroom. It doesn't arrive through the neat, black and white ink of a textbook. It is a slow, messy baptism that occurs in a gravel driveway under the weight of a 2-ton vehicle with black oil staining the forearms and a problem that refuses to cooperate. This environment does something surgical to the human brain. It builds a particular brand of confidence that cannot be faked, cannot be bought, and absolutely cannot be borrowed. Most people move through the modern world as passengers in their own lives, outsourcing every friction point they encounter. If something breaks, they find a specialist. If something fails, they seek an explanation from an authority. There is a comfortable safety in this, a way to keep one's hands clean and one's mind uncluttered. But the person under the hood made a different choice at some point in their history, consciously or not. They decided that the world was knowable. They decided that if they stayed with the problem long enough, if they listened closely enough, the machine would eventually reveal its secrets. That decision, seemingly about spark plugs and timing belts, was actually a profound declaration about the nature of reality itself. This is where the true psychology begins. The human brain responds to mechanical problem solving differently than almost any other cognitive demand. When a person diagnoses a misfire, they aren't just gathering data. They are constructing a three-dimensional mental model of an invisible, synchronized system. They are holding a dozen variables in their working memory simultaneously. The specific pitch of a whine, the acrid scent of burnt fluid, the rhythmic shudder of a piston, and the long history of every mile the car has traveled. They are cross-referencing these against a body of knowledge built not through logic, but through physical scars and tactile memory. Neuroscientists call this embodied cognition. It is the state where the hands and the brain cease to be separate entities and begin to function as a single, recursive unit. This knowledge isn't stored in the language centers of the brain. It lives in the muscles. It thrives in pattern recognition. It exists in the particular sacred silence that follows when a correctly seated bolt finally stops turning. Ask one of these people how they knew a bearing was failing miles before it seized, and they will pause. They might shrug and say, "It just felt wrong." They aren't being vague. They are reporting with absolute accuracy. The knowledge lives in a basement below the level of words. Shutterstock. This creates a personality trait that from the outside looks like a stubborn, iron-willed defiance. Those who work on their own machines tend to trust their own perception over received authority. They have lived through the moments where the expert was wrong, where the factory manual didn't account for the unique way metal fatigues in a certain climate, or where their own fingertips told them a truth that no digital diagnostic tool could confirm. Over time, this builds a bias toward direct experience that borders on the religious. They become naturally skeptical of those who speak with great sweeping confidence about things they have never physically touched. This isn't arrogance. It is an epistemology forged in the specific lonely frustration of a problem that only surrendered to patient first-hand attention. There is also a hidden relationship between mechanical work and the concept of time. In our modern world, we are told that everything can be hacked, optimized, or sped up. But an engine is a hard teacher of a different lesson. You cannot hack a rusted manifold bolt. You cannot rush the curing of a gasket seal. There are sequences that must be followed with the devotion of a monk. There are torque specifications that exist for physical, gravitational reasons, not bureaucratic ones. If you cut a corner, the machine will wait. It will find you. And the problem will return, usually with a vengeful interest. This teaches a rare, quiet patience, a realization that some things have their own timeline, and that timeline is not negotiable. People who internalize this carry it into their marriages, their careers, and their grief. They become unusually tolerant of slow processes and deeply suspicious of anything promising a quick fix. Now, consider the emotional gravity of the garage. For many, this skill was a gift passed down in the presence of someone else. Perhaps it was a father on a humid Saturday afternoon, or an uncle who never said, "I love you," but handed over a 10mm wrench and waited in the silence for you to find the bolt. These were not formal lessons. There was no curriculum, no certificate of completion. What was being transmitted in those quiet hours wasn't just technical data. It was a relationship to difficulty. It was a way of being with a problem that did not involve walking away. The car was merely the medium. The real content was the transmission of human resilience. This is why car knowledge so often fuses with identity. When a skill is learned through a relationship, it carries a weight that a YouTube tutorial can never replicate. The specific make and model of that first car is remembered with a biographical tenderness, not because of the steel, but because of who you were becoming while you were trying to make it run. We often misread these people. We see their self-sufficiency and assume they are cold or don't want help. We see their quiet competence and mistake it for indifference. But underneath that grease-stained exterior is someone who learned early that mastership is available to anyone willing to stay with the difficulty long enough. They have developed what psychologists call an internal locus of control. This is the unshakable belief that the outcomes of your life are determined by your own effort and your own understanding, not by luck, not by the economy, and certainly not by the whims of other people's decisions. This belief changes how you approach a job interview, how you handle a breakup, and how you look at a daunting medical diagnosis. It isn't that they don't need others. It's that they have a deeply encoded blood-level faith in their own capacity to figure it out. There is one final vital layer. Working on a car is one of the last remaining places in the modern world where a person can be completely, verifiably, and undeniably right. In most of our lives, success is a shifting shadow. Did the meeting go well? It depends on the boss's mood. Is the project a success? Check the KP is in 6 months. It's all subjective, but an engine that was a silent lump of iron 5 minutes ago and is now humming with the power of 100 horses, that is not a matter of opinion. The feedback is absolute. It is binary. It works or it doesn't. For people who live in a world of maybe and it depends, the garage is a sanctuary of truth. It is a place where reality gives a clear, unvarnished answer. This is why mechanical work is so often a form of psychological regulation. When the world feels uncontrollable, when institutions crumble, when the future looks like a fog, the engine offers a bounded problem with a knowable solution. The person who retreats to the garage on a difficult Sunday is not hiding. They are restoring their soul. They are rebuilding, in miniature, the experience of competence and clarity that the rest of the world has eroded. What looks like a hobby is a coping strategy. What looks like a mechanical skill is a spiritual one. And what looks like someone who simply knows about cars is actually someone who has learned, in the most physical way possible, that the world eventually gives way to patient attention. So the question we're sitting with as you look at your own life is not whether you can change your own oil. The question is, what broken thing have you been standing in front of, hood up, waiting for a stranger to fix, when the answer was always going to require the grease on your own hands and the courage of your own attention.